And welcome people back to we're going to look at, I'm calling it business planning method. So we dangle the carrot of this business canvas that people often dangle, but that's one tool of many that could be used for business planning purposes. And I like to go back to the drawing board with this stuff, because what works for one person might not work for another. So some of you will have seen this tool before, and some of you may even have done it, but if you've done it, you'd be able to do it really quickly. You know, you think you've done it, and then when you try and do it again, it's like, oh, what was that again? So I always start off this kind of workshop session with this simple tool. So this simple tool, rather than diving into the business model canvas, which is quite convoluted, although it's a good quick tool when you know what to do with it, actually it can still overwhelm you if you need just some prompts and some questions. And this 2-sentence business plan tool is a really helpful little, you know, piece of paper or printout, or however you want to write it down. But I want to give you a few minutes each to just look at this and start doodling in those boxes, or start writing down, you know, your answers to these 11 questions. And I'm not expecting you to get as far as 11, but I just want, you know, do you know, can you communicate what you're doing? So the tools like this work for many purposes. They work to help clarify and clear your head and get things down. They help to think about how you communicate what you're doing to the outside world. It's almost like a pitch document. You know, this is how you pitch what you do, your elevator pitch, or your pitch to a funder, or talking in a breakout when you've got to succinctly say what you're up to. But what it also does, and I'm hoping what it's doing here, your mind might go blank in one box. You might be very clear. Who's got the problem is an easy one. Who's got this problem? You're facing them every day. You can list who has that problem. You think you know how you're going to solve that problem, but when you start trying to describe what is the problem, that people might not have full language for that. But explain as best you can what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And when we set up Flourish, we couldn't describe the problem. We were too busy trying to solve it. You know, and we're still trying to describe it now, if I'm honest. But, you know, for us at Flourish, the problem is not enough women have economic independence. Not enough women are in, you know, roles of leadership and enterprise, and the world is missing out, both in terms of quality solutions, enterprises, and, you know, growth in the economy as a result. Those are the main problems that we're seeking to solve. You know, women, very diverse women in our case, have this, you know, and we do tend to funnel that down into women we're targeting women who face, you know, setbacks in some way, but have talent and have good ideas that they could take forward. We've got a range of ways that we've tried to solve this problem through, you know, enterprise programs, coaching, support, collaborating with others to come up with solutions, innovative solutions to supporting more women to achieve economic independence. We've got, you know, why should the person who has the problem buy from you? And this is who has the problem. Again, when you look at this, you might realize, you know, there's other customers rather than the beneficiaries specifically. And that's what I mean. Lots of tools are aimed at a private sector market, and you have to tweak them, you know. So there's why should the person who has this problem buy from you, if they can, or who else is your customer? You know, and what
nice way to think about that is who will pay you to solve this problem.
Yeah, exactly. Some of you might start to become more aware of, you know, clearly the resources that you need or have access to. Hi, Alicia. We've done a whole session this morning on products and services and thinking about all of that, and it's been recorded, but we're now moving into business model canvas stuff. I'm not going to go heavily into the business model canvas. What I normally do is I'm showing people some tools so that they can use the ones that work best for them. So this 2-sentence model is just an accessible one, and I've been giving everybody a few minutes here to start to bullet point what they can. And so I'm hoping you've started to bullet point this, and the first few boxes start to become okay, and then, you know, the how much will it cost, how will you make money, when will this be done, what are your measures of success, usually take a little bit longer if you've not had time to plan, think, or you've not been running for a while. But even when you have been running a while, if you know that actually you're going to have a shortfall this year, or you know, the funding streams that are out there are highly competitive and are shrinking, or are, you know, are not running, you know, in the timeframes that you need them to, then, you know, thinking about how you make money or where your resources and income are going to come from is still a priority, whatever size organization you are. So this tool here is one that's very accessible. You can walk it through quite simply, and when you go to access support from somebody else or from a coach, the bits that you've got nailed you can box off quickly, and the bits that you need support with you can focus in on. Yeah. I know some of you on our program here have been on other programs, and I just wonder if anybody who's been on a Time to Grow program or a previous program who might have done this exercise, or even if you've not, even if you've done a task like this before, any reflections on how you found this tool and whether it's been helpful, whether it's helped pinpoint things down. Might be busy working on it. I know I was in a workshop just recently, and you know, steam was coming off the pens of some of the people there, and once you take the time to just answer these 11 questions rather than overwhelm yourself with a 35-page business plan, you're in a good position then to take some action steps, you know, rather than feeling like, where do I start or what do I need to do? And you've got some pointers as to.
I find it quite useful to think about these things in the business model canvas as well, like a living document which you constantly update. It's not like you ever write a business plan and it's done. So whether you revisit it every 2 months or 6 months or every year, when you go back to it, you will see that things have shifted, and you may well have articulated the problem better. You may have better clarity on exactly what it is or what your activities are. And so you'll see how things shift over time, and that's a good thing because you're moving closer towards what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And I've just, with no explanation really, or no setting the scene for the workshop, I've thrown this at you just to get your brain in business planning thinking mode. So hopefully that you might have bullet pointed a few bits and bobs down, either in the tool, or in your notepad, or, you know, focused on what you know. And then I'll be, you know, really thinking about what you don't know, and making sure that either through our program coming up, or through your coaching sessions, or with other places that we can signpost you to, you know, where you might start to fill some of the gaps in your thinking. So just to take a step back from all of this, you know, I will often say, you know, business plan, schmizness plan, which is, you know, it's a bit reckless. You know, everybody needs to plan, don't they? That age old, you know, fail to plan, plan to fail kind of proverb. But ultimately what we don't want people to do is spend hours and days and years of their life writing lengthy business plans and never actually get off the page. You know, having worked for funders for years, there could be some people who hide very comfortably in a document, or hide in planning what their business card needs to look like, and never ever step out of their front door or into a Zoom or wherever their audience is and start checking what they think they're going to do actually makes sense to the wider world, that somebody wants to buy it and there's a market for it, and get some feedback and test themselves and their confidence to make these things come to life. So I purposefully don't spend lots of time scaring people into writing long business plans unless there's a need for it. So who cares and who needs a business plan, and who's the audience really? At a point in time, you know, if you're seeking investment at scale, or if you're some banks want you to have a business plan in advance if you're going for a business account. Some funders might want elements of a business plan, and putting this content together in a document or in various reports is very useful, because it's what you cut and paste into your funding bids, into your proposals, into your marketing. So you can't get away with not doing this stuff, but you don't necessarily have to sit down one day and go from page 1 to page 36 in one foul swoop. You'll find it's kind of builds in chunks over time. Well, that's the way I prefer to help people, so it's not so overwhelming. Certainly the key to this business planning stuff is the money and the finances. And I always say, do not put pen to paper unless you have to, without looking at the finances first. Anybody can tell a good tale, write a story, you know, come up with, you know, what the wordy parts of a a business plan might look like. The real stuff is in the finances, and that's what we've got this afternoon. Even if it's basic bag packet style calculations of what you're trying to do, numbers of people you want to involve and who you think is going to pay for this, and if you ran 3 of these a month or 3 of these a week, what would that generate, whether it's funded, whether it's paid for, you know, and does that marry up with cost it takes to run it and your time to do this, and all of the admin and the planning and the evaluation and the bid writing stuff. Making the figure stack up is by far and away the first thing to start with. Granted, we're doing it this afternoon, but if I've thrown that at you now, you know, it's all part of the process. So doing this aspect of business planning, I tell you what I will ask is, you know, who here has written a business plan out of interest? Who here can say, I've written a business plan, and I've written a business plan and I'm using it, or I've written a business plan and it's sat in a drawer. Is anybody on the call here or on our Zoom? I can look in the chat at them. I can look for hands, clapping hands, or someone can come off mute and say, this is what I'm up to.
Yeah, me sticker here. I've done a business plan before, but I don't even know where it is. So
there you go.
What I normally do nowadays is just write documents, and then I think I can follow through that. If I put something probably even in a book, like a 1-page document every year, and then I can follow through that. Even my budgets, I do that nowadays. Yeah.
So you've started to look at this, but as you say, it's disappeared, or you've not got your hands on it right now. And
no.
You know. And what made you choose to do that? Was it to get it out of your head? Did somebody ask for it? Had you got to tell sort of the people what you were doing?
Yeah, I think for me, the reason why, maybe because I think at the start of the business that I wanted to do, which I'm still doing anyway, was just to sort of have a general picture of where the business was going to go. But as it is with life, things change.
Totally.
There are so many variables. You might have your projections, even in finances, for year 1, year 2, year 3, but things sort of will change, and then you're like, oh, I didn't factor this in when I was doing this.
Absolutely.
So nowadays I tend to every year I just sort of look at the things that I want to do, and then cost them, but I'm very, very, very flexible. So I'm not so everything is not fixed.
And that can be fine if you're a small organization, or if you're not going for significant amounts of money. But if you're looking for investment or funding, they won't buy that approach.
I know. I think a business plan, as you're saying, is for a purpose. So I think if you're looking for probably an investor, they would want to see a business plan. If you're looking for probably somebody to put in a lot of money, they might want to see a professionally done business plan.
Well, they certainly won't take any risks, if you see what I mean, whether they're a funder or whether they're an investor or anyone else. But it's just, it is something, like it says here, that you do at a certain point in time. But what I will say is, you usually need it a little bit quicker than you realise you do. And that by starting it out, also, if you've got a board, or if you've got a group of people on a whatever constituted group, a kick or anything else, they need to, how do they know what they're getting into? How do they know what needs doing? How do they know if you're on track, if there's not something to refer back to? And as you say, the minute these things are written, they're usually obsolete. Something's changed, something's shifted, but at least you've got things to compare back to what you imagined would happen, whether it's a written plan of performance indicators or goals or set outcomes you want to achieve by a certain point, or whether it's a financial set of goals that you can refer back to. I'm going to come to a couple of other people that put their hand up. I saw Alicia did, and I think I saw Tina did. So I'll come to Alicia and Tina just to hear quickly, if you put a business plan together, why did you do that? Are you there, Alicia, too?
Oh, hi. Yeah, my mic was off. Yeah, so basically I've done a number of business plans. I've only had to ever use it once when I did a pitch just before lockdown with Santander Bank. But for me, I just like to have them anyway. That's just for my own personal development. I'm a person who likes lots of papers with the canvas mold. So because the way the world's changing and just everything's going up and down, for me, it's just a good way for me to see things and go back and where I am, like, you know, especially like when you're doing, you know, like your forecasting and stuff like that. So for me, it more helps with that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And you made a really good point there. Anybody who wrote a business plan or started to write a business plan and it was sat in a drawer or sat in a file or lost in transit or in translation, probably needs to revisit that post-COVID, through COVID. There's been a lot of business planning, you know, I've forgotten the words now, resilience and recovery sessions to help people re-business plan and remap all aspects of their business plan that needed a rethink. Now the landscape shifted. So you that's a good point as well, is that because even if you haven't done one, if you hadn't done it, you'd had to change it.
When I, like I said, done the business plan, you can kind of, you know, you can see what's going on, because if you are doing a pitch, sometimes there is an investor or a person what turns around and says, where was your 5 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? So it like you said, it can help you kind of do a timeline as well. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And, you know, a big part of what people don't do, which is in here, is, you know, map out their competitors effectively. But, yeah, I'll come back to that in a sec. Tina, I think you'd got your hand up. I think you might have been for this. I was just going to come to Tina. Thanks, Alicia. That's really helpful to hear. Tina, did you want to add anything into the mix on having put one of these or tried to put one of these together, and was it helpful, and where are you at with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went on the lovely Jenny Matthews Women in Business courses, so twice actually, right at the start, at the kind of ideas phase. And so my first business, which was the cake shop, part of the course was writing a business plan. And of course, you know, I'd never experienced anything like that before. So it was really helpful in terms of getting all these ideas out of my head and onto paper and some sort of coherent, you know, oh, okay, yeah, this could work actually. And
certainly professionalize what you're thinking, professionalize the way you describe it.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get out there.
Yeah, and so unfortunately had to close my cake shop, and at the time, fortunately, I was on another of Jenny's courses, which was the 10-week one. And so during that, we then did another business plan, and it was like 3 weeks into the course when I had to close my shop, and I was starting to think about new premises for the cake shop, and then had the idea for the LGBT centre, and wrote a business plan, and I was looking for premises, and then lockdown hit. And so I couldn't open a centre, I couldn't look for premises, and I had to build everything online. And it just kind of, you know, it was one of these, right, you've just got to get on with it and do it. So, you know, started a helpline, started online socials. But it's this idea of coming back to it that's, you know, that I think really screwed me last year. And more helpful than this kind of business plan, there's a, what's it called? A year compass, or my year. Year compass. And it's a reflective tool, and it breaks things down. So you do it at the end of the year, or you probably do it whenever, but it breaks it down into, it says, right, what was your last year about? You know, go through your calendar, write down the big events and the big things that happened in all areas of your life and work. And then who were the important people? What were your greatest accomplishments? What were your greatest challenges? And then thinking ahead to the next year. And not last Christmas before, I reflected on 2020 and planned 2021, but then I printed another copy out, and I did it as if it was this Christmas, and I was looking back on 2021 and planning 2022. And it was great. I had so much energy at the beginning of the year, but I ended up getting really distracted. And actually, when I did do the reflection again, I thought, my God, I've because I had a really shit last couple of months of last year, and that kind of took over my thinking of how the whole year had been. But actually the year was amazing. But if I had reflected and gone back to what I wanted to achieve over the year a little bit more often, talk to my directors, talk to my steering group, used the people that wanted to help, then I may have been in a slightly different position.
Yeah, well, that's really honest, Tina, and that's really helpful to be really brutal and scrutinize yourself in those ways. And I think lots of people don't, that busy running, or it might not be their style to grill themselves that hard. But I think the more you can analyze, not overanalyze, but I mean, analyze what you're doing and have ways of reflecting back and ways of planning forward, the more confident you feel in what you're doing, the better you can communicate, the better you can see when you're going off track on where what's causing it, to try and help yourself, ask others for the same sort of help, and so on. So, well, thank you for that and for being so honest. I'm going to here's to 2022, and I look forward to seeing what you're projecting in 2023. And it's, you know, it's all part of the journey, isn't it? Absolutely. Some of the things that you described there on that compass were some of the things that we do on our Time to Grow program on days 1 and 2 that we just had with 30 women in Wigan from all over. And those questions that you just said were absolutely critical to help.
You can't doing what we do, you cannot separate yourself from what you do. So you've got to look at, you know, what do you personally want to achieve, and how does that balance with what you want to achieve? You know, this year I'm hoping to get pregnant.
Oh, there you go.
And you know, so that is going to impact on my business planning. So
absolutely, yeah. No, you make a good point, and it's something that isn't in traditional business plans, but it's absolutely key when you're thinking about the wider picture.
Yeah.
You know, and it's knowing who's the audience and who needs to know what. You know, if you won't go and tell a funder or this, that, the other, you know, you aren't going to be there for 9 months. They're investing in you. Not that should be the case, but you know, more questions create more questions sometimes, people, when you just Anyway, I'm just going to move on to some other stuff. So as I've said, this sort of stuff can be overwhelming, but what we have got here, for those of you that either are doing this, want to do this, or have a business plan and think, has it got all the elements I need? How is it structured? Is it digestible to the person that's trying to read it? This is just an example on the right hand side of a more meaty business plan when you get to that point, you know. And it starts off, the executive summary is always something that you would do last, so you never start with that. That's just a summary of what you've put. You come to that at the end. But, you know, starting to talk about, you know, what's the background to the company, you know, how's this thing come around, and how long have you been established, your mission and objectives, which is something that most people will have started to work on or put down or have had for some time, and keep, you know, your any trading history or activity to date, you know, what's your history and track record to date, information in there about your you know, current business model. So what are your products and services? How do you know, how is this all operating right now? You know, perhaps your history of what you've been earning, you know, what's been your turnover, profits and surpluses or otherwise to date, and anything that's evolving. Then you might be approaching a particular funder or particular organization for a new proposition, or a new plan, or development of what you're doing, and so that gets tucked in terms of, you know, what's coming next. You might, you know, a question on funding bids sometimes is always, you know, who are you? Why should we be backing you? What's your experience? Why should we take a risk with you? You know, why you, or why you and your team? You know, and so having that, how this thing's, you know, governed and led, and what your structure is, and who's involved, and what, you know, what their roles are, and what, you know, their biogs of their experience, is quite a key thing to have. And then the important bits come in, and this is where I often chunk business plans into chunks, as you'll see in a minute. You know, market analysis, social, which means, you know, do you understand the market? Where's there a need for this stuff? And there's a thing called a PESTLE report I'm going to show you in a minute, but market analysis is really understanding the landscape, locally, nationally, politically, and in various other ways. You know, how do you know there's a need for what you want to offer? It's basically market analysis. Impact research findings from how you've been tackling this need or how you've been addressing this market need, and whether you've got them yet or not, social value indicators and other evidence on what you've achieved so far. Competitor analysis is a big one that most people don't think about, but it's really key. I'm not going to get into that today, it's almost another workshop, but people don't understand who their competitors are. They say, oh, with no competition, or they think competitors are people like them, and in reality, or organizations like them. And in reality, competitors are a massive market. You know, if you're a health and well-being business of some sort, every different kind of health and well-being business is a competitor to some degree. Your competitors are what your clients, customers or commissioners are spending. Who are they spending money with? They're your competitors. Marketing strategies, financials, and you know, managing risk, and you know, all of these sorts of things are all things to be thinking about as you develop what you're doing. But whether or not you've got them all in one big document is another matter and is not necessarily critical, but chunking it down into the bits that are important to you is important. So as a starter for 10, if you've not done much of this yet, or you haven't got time to write a big business plan, or you're just tinkering with the idea of a new project, or you want to go for that funding bid, but you're like, oh, do we really want to do this? Doing a quick SWOT analysis to just look at, is this worth it? How do we think we're tackling this? Or should we be doing this right now? Whether it's your business and your organization in its entirety, or whether it's an angle, a program, an activity, or a part of it, you can use as very simple SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and think about bullet pointing down what's going on. So at least if you're trying to talk to your fellow colleagues and directors, talk to your community, talk to a funder, you can answer any questions that anybody might have. You know, here's the benefits for what we're going to try and do here. Here's, you know, foreseen issues, challenges, and problems that we might have. The real opportunity for us is this, you know, and it's going to lead to these things, or what these people in our community are going to benefit from this, that, and the other. And the things that we, you know, that could throw a spanner in the works are, you know, and being able to work through that doesn't take long. These things can happen very quickly. You don't get me wrong, you've still got to cost things out, but if you've got more threats and weaknesses than you've got strengths and opportunities, and actually not doing this in isolation is sometimes helpful. You know, you know what's in your head, but once you put something down on paper very quickly like this, and you talk to whoever, partners, allies, members of your board, they can strengthen the thinking around this so that it's not all what you've imagined. So most of you, I'm thinking, have come across a SWOT, but people perhaps don't use them as frequently as they might, to be able to just think and prioritise and ask for help. PESTLE I talked before, so market analysis. The reason that we talk about this is because it sounds all business speak, but this is key for the voluntary community sector and social enterprises. If you're going to write funding bids, and if you're going to apply to commissioners, which, you know, good 50% of people's income, give or take, you know, depending on where you're at, and certainly through COVID has been the case, then what we've got is people want to know why there's a need for this stuff, why they should be spending or investing or commissioning stuff from you. I'm just going to be at 1 second. Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry about that. So I was just trying to explain that although this sounds very business speak, actually this is what funding bids are written on. You know, if you've not got really good data that can explain what's the political context and landscape and data saying about what you're doing, you know, what is the local picture, what is the national picture, what are the economic advantages for what you're doing, what are the environmental advantages, and what are the technological implications. If you haven't got your evidence stats there, and I'll run a different session on this another day to understand what this is really, really key. It's the whole market need and demand, and it's the whole how do you know, when they're making their decisions, these funders and their commissioners, if you haven't got your data, either data that you've gathered from your own consultations and own stakeholder engagement and communities, or if you hadn't gone out there and got all the research that exists, and there's heaps of it, everybody's got oodles of data at their fingertips, they just don't realize it. You can be using all of this stuff to back your case, even if this is new to you, and even if you haven't necessarily got the language to describe what's going on, somebody else has already researched what you're doing to death. And all you have to do is go and uncover it, and we can help you and show you where to find this stuff. So I flag this up as a key thing. So even if you're not going to sit down and write a business plan, working out, what your products and services are, as we've been doing earlier, thinking about the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats of what you're doing, working through who's got some data and some evidence, that says this is needed. How is this benefiting, our area, our region, the nation, depending on your angle, is all important stuff. I just wonder, has anybody got any questions on this? Because I'm conscious where it's a new topic, it's like, what does this mean? Or I just wondered it before I talk about anything else, whether anybody's got anything. Is it making sense? Does it? And it's all quiet on the Western Front. Just checking something. Here we go. Okay, well, no questions there. We can come back and have a check-in with people. But I'm just going to move on now then to show you and leave you with the homework of business model canvas. And before we do, has anybody used the business model canvas tool before? And does anybody want to just give their take on it while I'm pulling? So we've got some thumbs there. I'm just going to, where we are, participants. I've got, we've put up here on the screen, what it is and so forth. I'm just going to, Jenny's not got a thumb up, but I'm guessing she's come across it. I was just going to get your take on the business model canvas tool. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about business models earlier, and business models are the way that the company generates profits or brings in its income in order to try and make profits. As we've said, people can get into waffly business plans without actually thinking how it's going to be delivered, how it's going to be effective, and how the different parts of it all function and work together. And sometimes all you need to do is just write down your, monthly bullet points, what you're doing in January, February, March, April, May, and you just need to get running with it. But after a while, it starts to become more important to really understand the mechanics of how your enterprise or your venture or your organization is working. And we're suggesting that the business model canvas does help with this. So I'm kind of picking on Jenny because I know she runs all sorts of programs like this, but I was just curious, do you use the business model canvas in your sessions, Jenny?
I don't. I've seen it many times.
Yeah.
It's a way to include more visual aspects as well.
Yeah.
I have a business plan that I've used and developed over the years that Tina was very about.
Yeah.
I like to take my women through because it does what Tina and I think what Mary was saying before. It gets all the jumbled stuff out of your mind.
Yes.
When we think in a very jumbled way. It doesn't actually have to make a lot of sense. When we write the words down, it has to make, especially when we show it to other people, it has to make kind of sense. So I stick to a fairly traditional plan when I work with other people.
Yeah.
However, the business plan that I use myself is just a one-page document and is very, very simple.
Yeah, exactly.
I've actually used for myself, I've never used business model.
Absolutely. I thought I'd just see, and as I say, the way that we work with people usually just to get things out of their head and have the starter for 10 is this 2-sentence version. If you can get answers to these questions, either you on your own or with support from someone like Flourish or someone like Jenny, you can then start to flesh this stuff out. So you might just have some bullet points initially, and then you can create paragraphs and sentences and sections of a document around this. And that's quite an accessible and simple way to get started. So you don't get bogged down on page 8 and it's blank sheet and you can't think what to put. Using the canvas is that you'll see, I'm just flagging up now, is a slightly different thing again. It's not actually that dissimilar from the set of questions that were posed to you in the 2-sentence business plan. It just looks different, and the phrasing of it all is a little bit different. But I was going to just show you it. The beauty of this, as Jenny mentioned before, having it all on one page or having a quick, easy way to bullet point things out is usually feels a bit more digestible than having a big document, A, for you to write, and B, for you to share. Most, I don't know, funders, investors, supporters, people that might help you with what you're doing, haven't got time to read 30 pages, but they can glance at an overview, you know, of what you're up to. And this tool does give you that in a bit more depth than the 2-sentence one does. So just moving my sections around. So I'm just gonna, you know, there's different places that you can start on here, and usually you're better off starting with what makes sense and what feels best. And quite often the easy bit to start with is key activities, because you know what you're doing. And your key activities are what you're up to. It might be that you're running events certain days of the week, you might be running certain programs, you might be running counselling sessions. The key activities that you run is quite an easy one to think about, and think about where you're working with. But in reality, when you then flip, for example, to, it says segments, but it's you know, who are the people that are buying this stuff? You know, are your key activities aimed at beneficiaries, i.e. the people that are going to benefit, who you think are going to benefit from these key activities, or are they there to benefit the customers that people are paying for them, or a mixture of both? And so thinking about who your audience is, who you think wants this, and what key activities they might actually buy, use, or pay for, is often where people's minds are at, because that's where they've started. I guess in reality, what we often have to do with this sort of stuff is take a bit of a step back, because although you might have started running and you've mapped out, well, here's our products and services, i.e. your key activities, and here's who we think we're working with, this stuff around the value proposition, and often funders that want to know, what's your value proposition? You know, what is it, who wants to buy what you've got to offer, and is what you're offering what they want, need, and is it going to be impactful for them? Bit of a long-winded, but that's basically, you know, in terms of, you've got a set of activities, products and services, you've got a set of people who are either benefiting from these or buying from them, but is it delivering the goods? You know, and have you asked these people if it is? You know, so you can't really get into this realm of putting this canvas together until you've started to ask and prod and poke a few more questions. So certainly if you've got activities that you're running and you've got people benefiting and people commissioning, paying or funding this stuff, you then have to take a step back and start to evaluate that, whether it's for customer service, whether it's having a direct social impact that you intend, and working out whether what you're providing is good value for them, you know, financially, emotionally, physically, you know, and in terms of sort of social return. And you can only really fully understand and complete your value proposition once you start talking to people, you know, and asking them, you know, what do you value about what we do? What have you enjoyed? There's a whole session coming up on how to do this, but it's just flagging up these, you know, where you end up leaping around this canvas until you've completed it, or until you've understood all aspects. So we've jumped from, we know what our activities are, so we've bullet pointed those. We think we know who our beneficiaries and our customers are, or who we'd like them to be. Could we talk to somebody about this and just see, can they think of anyone else? Or, you know, am I missing a trick here? And can somebody see beneficiaries or customers that I can't yet identify, or I don't yet know? And then in asking questions of the people that you're working with, you can then start to piece together whether what you're offering them is of value, and it is really benefiting them and creating impact in the areas that you'll want to have social impact.
I've just popped in the chat, there's a useful value proposition formula which brings a lot of this together. So your value proposition is the name of your organization, what it does, so the activities or kind of the things that you do that underpin your theory of change, but so what you do to the problem you are solving for the beneficiaries. And if you can pinpoint those 4 aspects, you've got the formula for your value proposition. And it might take a bit of thinking to get to that point, but it's a very succinct way. And when you come back to looking at your whether what you're doing is core, if you can keep going back to your value proposition, it'll be very clear. Are we doing what we said we do? Yeah. Are we solving the problem we say we solve for the beneficiaries?
Absolutely. And in an upcoming session, we're looking at theory of change and social impact measurement, and it's drip feeding all of these bits together so that they make sense. Because it can, they're all pieces of a jigsaw, basically, that you're all the different moving parts of your business, and laying them out flat here, it's a bit like, where do we start? But certainly by knowing what your key activities are, knowing who you think you're serving, and asking them key questions to check that you are, is an aspect and a place to start. Jumping back to some other moving parts, the channels bit is really all about marketing and reaching your audience, and what methods are you using or planning to use to reach your audience. So you might see in a funding bid, how do you know the people that, how are you going to reach the people that you say you're going to reach? How will you engage, diverse groups or whatever it might be? If you've already pre-planned what the channels are, so it might be that you're reaching people through newsletters or through targeted emails. It might be that you've got a communication strategy to do with, aspects of marketing, but aspects of using social media. It might be that you have a weekly drop-in, and actually, as much as that weekly drop-in is there for a brew and a chat, it's actually a great channel for you to physically get hold of your customers, your beneficiaries, the people who need to influence and inform what you're doing. So there's various channels that you can use. It might be that you have referral partners, which then starts to link back, your channels and how you're reaching your beneficiaries directly needs to be reviewed all the time, because new methods of communication come about. And actually, if you're developing new services or new programs or projects, how they're accessing information from one community to the next, or from one audience to the next, might change hugely, in terms of what people read, where people are on social media or not, what kinds of events or forums or strategic groups you might be sat on. Everything will change depending on what you're doing and what's evolving for you. It kind of linking back across to partners and key stakeholders, they tie in to lots of things. Not only are they kind of listed under resources because they're kind of complementary to a complementary resource for you, but they're often like a referral partner or a pathway into reaching you as well. And they may even be supporting you in terms of delivering some of your activities. So mapping down and having a look, and it's an exercise in itself. They'll never all fit in that little box, but who are the essential groups or people that you need to deliver your program, whether that's physically delivering it, supporting you with the marketing of it, and making it come to life. And key resources covers all sorts. It covers the people, some of those partners, those stakeholders, your own team, but it also covers, the types of finances that you might need, the types of space that you might need to operate from, materials, equipment. It's listing everything down that, what key resources you need in order to function. Once you know what your activities are, you've got an idea of what resources are needed to deliver them, and other people involved, whether they're being paid, whether they're there as partners and supporters, you're then able to put together your costing structure better, because then you've left no stone unturned. It might be that there's only certain aspects of what you're doing that are costed and covered right now, but once you've mapped things out more broadly, you spot, what's not part of your full cost recovery plan, or who's not being paid just yet, or where are you getting pro bono resources, and is that sustainable? And looking at what costs you incur right now, whether that's an exercise like Tina said, look back last year at what things cost you, which you can do through your bank accounts or through your, you know, a funding application that you delivered and what it costed and then what it really costed. However is best for you to look at your planning, you know, historically. I would say that your bank account should be the best way. Your bank account for your project or organisation or business. It will help you track and measure and see what's changing or what needs to change as you grow, or what's had to change through COVID because things have, you know, had to be altered. For those of you that have been running a little while, you know, you'll have a set of accounts, and once your accounts start to build year on year, you'll soon see whether you know what's increasing and what's decreasing. And there are types of software Gurj might mention later, you know, that pull off great reports that help you look at this. I guess some of you on the call here might be using QuickBooks or Xero or other tools out there to help people manage their business accounts. And all of, you know, this thing around cost structure can be made easier by using some of these sorts of tools if you aren't already. I'm just moving my bits and bobs around. What have we not covered? So types of intervention really, you know, ties in with key activities. So, you know, like we talked about this morning, what is it you're running, you know, and is it a product or service? I think we boxed that off this morning. And the only other bits to sort of cover off really that we've not looked at, absolutely, all the section across the bottom, once you start looking at your cost structure, whether or not you're making surpluses yet or whether you plan to in the future, but what you're going to do, where you invest those is going to be key. And, you know, revenue is about, you know, breaking that down and looking at what your different revenue sources are going to look like. This is set up as a way of planning growth, if I'm honest. You know, that's why it says sources by percentage, but really your different types of income that you're going to generate, and is it balancing out basically, and is it tying back in with what you project, and is it covering what it needs to cover? Is really what the bottom's all about, so that you will know full well whether or not you're going to make some surpluses. Although a lot of us on this call here are not-for-profit organisations, we either have to clean our own face and make sure that there's some sort of zeroed or slight surplus, or some of us are seeking to create a significant surplus to then reinvest back in the community. Everybody's at a slightly different place in terms of what they're trying to do. So I just wonder, I appreciate there's a lot on there and it can be like, ugh. And I would say, if you're looking at this and going, ugh, you know, don't like the look of that, this is not making sense to me, then start with this one, because you answer all of these questions and it gives you aspects of all the different parts of the business canvas. And where relevant and when ready, and you're ready to get into it in a bit more depth, then using the Canvas tool here will help you flesh out what that 2-sentence version gives you. It's all a variation of a theme when you compare the two, but one might be slightly more digestible than the others. And as Jenny said previously, you do have to put these plans together down in documents eventually, either for your own sanity or to share with your team, or because somebody's asking for this information and you can't just pull it out your head every time. You've got to be able to present information, cut and paste into bids or tender documents or whatever else. So it's carving in the time as well. I might just come back to everybody in a second to see what they've made of what they've been hearing. Anybody else who wants to add in any thoughts, particularly perhaps some of those larger organisations who have had to spend time doing this stuff, and also trying to share tips on where do we make the time to do this. You know, when we're busy running what we're running and everyone's, you know, delivering things, sorting out the money, sorting out, you know, dealing with the day-to-day, how on earth do you fit time for this in as well? So we can share some tips on that, but I'm just going to stop sharing that because it might be hurting people's eyes and see what people have made of what they've heard so far. We will be taking a lunch break in a mo. But I just wanted to stop sharing that so I can see you, see if everyone's still awake, because it's, you know, there's a lot there. Any thoughts? You know, Jessica's been running Frog and Bucket for quite some time. It'd be interesting to get some thoughts from Jess. And I don't know if you're still on the call. Kathy was here from Rochdale. I can't see her currently, but Jess, any thoughts on this? And it's horrible when you get put on the spot, because I mean, even large organizations don't have huge lengthy business plans necessarily, or they don't have loads of hours in the day to keep, you know, rehashing all of this stuff. But just curious, Jessica, anything you're happy to say or share?
Yeah, business plans tend to come too late. They kind of tend to come when things are going wrong and you need to look at everything, or borrow money. I'm not the best person for this, because if I have to do a business plan, it's for someone else, like a bank, or and then I'm writing what they want to hear or see.
And that's and there's a pressure element there, and it's frustrating, and you may or may not have, like, you can't write what you want to write because you're writing it for a particular audience. And I think there is some whether or not you've got time, whether or not it's your thing, do you think there is some what's the word I'm looking for? Do you think rather than come to this at the 11th hour when it's like, oh, you have to, is there some benefit to perhaps putting time or having some help to put these things together in advance, or in your own, on your own terms, in your own way, so that it makes perfect sense to you, rather than
for the frog? I just did one again at the start of this year. I mean, we're 28 years old. Things are going really good. But I thought it was important to kind of think, right, how am I going to capitalize on that and see growth again this year? And also I need the staff to be aware of a plan, so they know what we're working towards. So I had to document it. It's like New Year's resolutions. You have to write it down to kind of stick to it.
That's a really good way of putting it.
So but then also not be single track minded. This is what's on my plan. I can't deviate. I can't react, because things will change. Different opportunities will present themselves. So you don't want to be rigid to the business plan, and then it's not practical to redo one every month.
Absolutely, because life kicks in, things change, and ultimately you're responding to either customer need or financial need, or, you know, staffing where people have staff, you know, staff and resource implications for whatever it is you're trying to do. So that's what I mean. That's why I don't tell people to write big lengthy business plans, because they can just change so radically from what you've put, and that is quite normal. But by putting a series of short reports together, or by bullet pointing things down in something that's digestible and you can reflect back on easily, potentially you're more likely to use it or stick to it, or be able to communicate with others with it, I suppose. That's our sort of standard rule of thumb. Anybody else got any thoughts on all of this business planning stuff? Is anybody in the throes of having to start one or put one together? I wonder whether, Asma, you've been having to do a lot lately, lots of funding bids in the last year or more. I just wonder, I don't know, even you even come off your mute, but particularly where people are thinking about writing funding bids, having this stuff down in some way, shape or form is key, and keeping it refreshed, as Jessica was saying there, once a year, or, you know, as frequently as you can manage, keeps that information alive, so that if somebody's asked to put in a proposal for something, you can cut and paste, or if somebody's got a funding bid, you can cut and paste. And
Jenny's got her hand up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say something? Who's
We'll have Tika, and then we'll come to Jenny. Go on, Tika.
I wanted to say, because our organization is still a community organization at the moment, and after listening to the speakers that have spoken before me now, we are planning to register the organization. We've made a decision to go CIC,
Okay.
So with everything that I think I've heard today, what we're going to do, that will be the first thing I think we're going to do, come up with a business plan for the organization. Probably we might not do it for maybe 5 years, but we can do something for 3 years and then keep on working at that. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks so much for the information that has been shared today.
Been helpful so far, and there's plenty to come after lunch, because we've got all the financial side, which is you either love it or loathe it, and we'll come to that later, but it's critical. Jenny, what were you going to add there?
I was just going to say, for those of us that have worked in the world of business support for a long time, Nicola, saying the words business plan to ourselves or to other people, you know, we know what it means. When you're the same as me, when you sat there in front of a group of women who are new to the thoughts of self-employment and enterprise, whether they're social enterprise or whatever, you know, you can see them visibly shrink in their chair with the thought of writing a business plan, because, you know, it's like, this is where someone's told me I'm going to become bankrupt in a short amount of time. Very scary thing. And it's trying to take all those myths away and get a realistic view in there. So for me, it's the same. It's called a business plan, but it could be your holiday plan, or you're having a dinner party plan, or I'm getting the kids dressed and I'm going out.
Changing the world for the better plan. You know, that's ultimately what everybody's up to.
And I do think, although I'm not disagreeing with you, and as I said before, I use a one-page plan now. But Tina was saying in the chat, I think sometimes to use a slightly bigger plan where we can just go like bleh and get it all.
And we've got tools where you've got your whole business plan, and there's like 4 or 5 questions under each point. If you fill in the questions, you've got your first business plan drafted down. And ultimately that came from Unlimited, and when you apply, if anyone ever applied or applies in the future, it used to be called a level 2 award, and now it's called a Grow It award, but it will have a new name in the future. The funders almost give you the tools. You know, Key Fund have got a really good business plan template, you know, that I can dig out and put in the chat later. And that's, again, if you fill in all these questions, you've done your job, and it's all there, and it doesn't feel quite as painful. Or if you go on one of Jenny's courses and, you know, work through over a 10-week period, boom, you know, you've got it down. So it's just giving you options as to kind of where you're at in your journey, what's the best methods for you to piece this stuff together. And ultimately, Flourish don't have this, you know, we've had business plans, and we put business plans together, and we have cash flow forecasts for what we're planning, but a lot of the time, the things that we're regurgitating, it's a kick-ass funding bid that worked really well for us that we keep using again, because it's pretty much a business plan in itself, or it's a proposal document with, you know, with all sorts of proposals for work. Once you've got it down, you know, and the way you describe what you do, who's on the team, what your products and services are, how you're going to deliver this, you know, what, you know, how to cost things out. It's not always your business plan tool that you go back to time and time again for your content, for what you need. It might be something like those documents as well. So it's just finding which method works best for you, so that you can sleep at night, you feel like you've got a plan in place that you can scrutinize, and that other people can read and look at and scrutinize. And then ultimately, you know, a lot of what's in that plan needs to be on your website, describing what you do and how you operate as well. So just things to bear in mind.
I've got a new Women in Business program starting on next Thursday, for any women that's M11 to M19, not unfortunately, funded by One Manchester. So, you know, if any of you are interested, and we only spend 1 day on a business plan. We don't write the business plan. We go all the way through it, and we explain what it is, why we do it, what the point is. So just contact me if you're interested. So
you got your hand up there. Do you want to make one last thoughts before we break and take a lunch break and come back for Gurj shortly?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've seen these on the Time to Grow programme, but because I have a really crystallised idea, I don't think they meant as much to me as they do now. And I think what I'm doing now is I'm doing like an R&D thing, which will then lead into the bigger thing. And I can see how I can use these models to kind of present the R&D idea to people, to get them interested in that, but then also to build the case for the funding for then the bigger application. So now that I know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
things make a lot more sense.
That's it. And it's all a journey. It's all kind of horses for courses. And that's why we've given you different tools there. If it's just early stage and you're working a few things out, a SWOT analysis works just fine to start to piece things together. If you're getting a bit further down the line and you're looking at trying to organize yourself, that 2-sentence business plan can be quite easy to work through those questions and get started. You know, building on those and bulking those out starts to piece together, as Jenny was describing, that a more thorough business plan. And the canvas is a good document. What happens is you get buried in sections of that canvas that are comfortable, or that you've got all your information on, and you don't gather the information, or you don't touch or think about that parts of that jigsaw puzzle that you don't like. And at least that's fine. You know, fill in and do what you can do, and show somebody like me or Jenny or Mac or Salford CVS or the Growth Hub or wherever you want to get your support from, show them where the gaps are, and they'll work with you on how to make sense of those grey areas or empty areas, so that you can then, even if you know you don't fully get that bit, there's a reason why it's there and it's important. And some of these things become more important or not, depending on what stage of development that you're at, clearly, you know.
And it's also kind of made me think about the importance of planning in the data collection.
Yes.
Early on, so that you've got the evidence. Then
Otherwise you're making it up, aren't you? And then people wonder why nobody's buying from them, or they've not got this thing, or, you know, where am I, why is, you know, it can be, the sooner you get information back from your beneficiaries, customers and stakeholders, the sooner you get a really polished, more refined thing, and more people are aware of it. And they a lot of people don't know half of what you do, you know what I mean? And the minute you start talking to them and asking them questions and explaining, it gives you an opportunity to explain as well. It's not just an evidence gathering exercise, it's a way to build relationships with people so they understand the opportunities that you can offer and what they can get from you, as well as all the stuff they realized, or they, if that makes sense. But I'm conscious we want people to have a good half-hour lunch break. Gurj is going to get us thinking again after lunch on the money side, so I promise it won't be painful. He's quite entertaining with it all, really. And we'll anybody, if you've got any questions, fire away.
So